Hey, what is up mortals? It is Jessica Gem here with a new video for you. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of What If Midoriya Had the One Ring. I just wanted to greet you guys by saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. And so, we begin. Of all the damn times for her water to break, it'd be when Inko and Hisashi were on a vacation tour at the tip of Mount Fuji. As Inko fell to her back, screaming in pain, whilst people gave her room aside from her husband, whose hand she was crushing with strength that could rival All Might in Hisashi's opinion right now. According to the tour guide, emergency heroes were on the way, but the delivery would have to be done on the top of the dormant volcano. Luckily, these heroes were trained in the delivery of a child. The next few hours were harrowing for everyone, Inko and Hisashi especially. As the hero arrived and began the delivery of the baby, it could be felt. The ground quaked. The area became increasingly hot. Fuji had been awakened and had done so with a furious power. Thanks to the fact that the Great Mountain was monitored 24/7, it didn't take long for more pro-heroes to come flooding in, to evacuate the area and prepare to handle a possible eruption. There was but one problem. Inko couldn't be evacuated and give birth at once. It was with a final rumble from the mountain that it ceased its threats of erupting, as the cries of a young, healthy baby boy called out, almost as if the mountain feared the repercussions if it did not heed the call of one so small. At first, a few heroes were equal parts worried and curious if this baby, named Izuku Midoriya, was already born with a quirk, but a quick test proved negative. Still, they advised the Midoriya family to keep getting their son checked up, far from any mountains or volcanoes, as Izuku grows, just in case that was but a taste of his quirk. The years went by, and Midoriya didn't exhibit any more signs of a quirk, not even one remotely close to what was feared he might have. Due to the nature of the potential quirk sitting inside the boy, the Midoriya family were assigned an expert to handle Izuku's medical checkups by the Hero Commission themselves, meaning he was visited each day on his birthday by two heroes, one to do the quirk checkup and the other to make sure nothing goes wrong if the worst comes to pass, Recovery Girl and Eraserhead. To say that these two heroes became the young boy's favorites in the hero world would be an understatement. Gradually, the boy with promise of a potentially hyper-destructive quirk attracted the attention of one Katsuki Bakugo. The pair forged a friendship, Midoriya gushing over Bakugo's explosion quirk, and as for the Ash Blonde, well, he was beyond pumped up to see Midoriya's quirk, and see it in action. Izuku cried out in pain as his hand burst into terrible flames that sent waves of fear through those who witnessed it. Soon the fire died down, Midoriya panting as he clutched his hand tightly. It was only when he ceased his heavy breathing to gaze upon his own hand and allowed Recovery Girl to see it too. Shining beautifully on Izuku's finger was a ring of pure gold. Recovery Girl had rushed Izuku away to gather data on this strange quirk. Soon, she and Midoriya emerged from a private room, both with a slightly defeated look. Well, I've identified your son's quirk. Despite the events at Mount Fuji, it would seem the quirk he possesses does not have the powers or capabilities that we or the Commission feared, but instead something perhaps more mundane. You see, your son is able to call upon this ring around his finger, and, well, it seems like that's it. Recovery Girl looked to Izuku, who was running a finger over his ring that he could call upon thanks to his new quirk. Aizawa narrowed his eyes at Izuku, and then turned to Recovery Girl. I'm sensing there's a but in this conversation, aren't I? Recovery Girl sighed, but not before giving the tired hero a whack in the leg with her cane. Ouch. Sorry, jeez. Yes, there is indeed a but. I've never seen or heard of a quirk like this one. So, with your consent, Mr. and Mrs. Midoriya, I'd like to take your son with me to UA for a week at the very least. just to be sure I'm not missing anything, and I'm certain the other UA staff will help me if they can. To say Izuku's face lit up with a light that could rival the fireworks display would be an understatement. Soon, however, the young Greenette posed a question that sparked interest in a pair of ears that had been listening in on the conversation without anyone's awareness. Oh, can Kachan come? He has an amazing quirk and loves heroes too. Please, Miss Recovery Girl. He's my best friend, and having him there with me would make me feel so much better. Izuku may have just been 5 years old, but when it came down to it, most children of that age were masters of the art of getting their way through manipulation via the use of their cuteness. The hidden listener grew silently giddy hearing Midoriya's request, but was soon scared stiff as a scarf wrapped around his young body, pulling him into the house from outside the open window. It would seem Bakugo had been eavesdropping. Put me down! Put me down! You can't take Izuku with a quirk like that. He told me it could make mountains rumble. I won't leave his side until I know for sure he has a badass quirk, and how to help him keep it under control. The young Bakugo barked at the heroes, as Aizawa sighed and lowered the explosive child next to Midoriya. Aizawa rubbed his temple as he turned to Recovery Girl and began speaking to her in American English. Huh? What are you two saying? What do you mean, Kachan? They were just talking about whether your parents and Nezu would say yes to you coming with me. This gave an uneasy air, as the two heroes purposefully spoke in a language nobody in the house, barring them, could understand for privacy, and yet Izuku Midoriya translated it perfectly. Narrowing her eyes, Recovery Girl spoke out a short sentence in Latin towards Midoriya, as if it were phrased like a question. There was a silence as the boy cocked his head, and all in the room looked on in confusion, not understanding a word. I'm sorry, Miss Recovery Girl. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. Where is it? Is it by the heart? Recovery Girl was slightly taken aback. Once again, he'd understood her question perfectly, despite it being difficult and in Latin. Well, it seems there's more to this quirk ring than meets the eye. And since you are so adamant about staying by his side, young man, I suppose we'd best ask your parents if you can join us. Needless to say, Mitsuki Bakugo was thrilled to have a chance to have time off from her egotistical son and his explosions. Ultimately, the week of testing the ring and Midoriya led to a few discoveries. Discovery 1. Nobody could pull the ring off of Midoriya's finger unless he allowed it. However, when somebody else wore the ring, it was always easily removed, and sometimes would have an almost unnatural habit of ending up back with Midoriya. Discovery 2. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could damage or even leave a mark on the pristine golden ring. In fact, most attacks towards the ring would reflect back to the source. Discovery 3. When wearing the ring, Midoriya could understand any form of spoken or written dialects. And the final discovery, if someone else wore Midoriya's ring, it seemed that it granted them his ability of translation, whilst Midoriya seemed to retain his quirk capability, with or without the ring. Bakugo turned to face Midoriya with a scowl on his face. He'd been cheated. Izuku was supposed to be powerful, a worthy rival, his best friend, but he wasn't any of those things. No, not anymore. All he was to the Ash Blonde was a useless ring-wearing translator. I want you to understand one thing, Izuku. From this day forward, you're nothing to me. You're useless. You're Deku, and I'll make sure everybody knows it. Feeling a dagger plunge into his back, the newly branded Deku ran away from Bakugo. He didn't look back or pay attention to where he was running, but he felt a noise pounding in his head, a loud clanking of metal, a hammer against an anvil. Midoriya pushed these sounds to the bottom of his youthful mind as he finally got his bearings and asked the kindly police officer to escort him home. As it turned out, Midoriya had run quite the distance, but felt little exhaustion. physically at least. Life was hard beyond belief for Midoriya, as every day at middle school he was bullied, teased, mocked, and never once called by his proper name. It was always Deku, never Izuku or Midoriya. One day, however, Deku was being attacked by some of Bakugo's thugs that called themselves his friends, but they were disposable extras to Katsuki, just like everybody else was to the explosive betrayer. And nobody knew this better than Izuku Midoriya. The two attacked Deku and gave the Green Ant nowhere to run, since Bakugo was being held back in class for a bit, so he'd be late for Deku's scheduled beating. Thankfully for small mercies, a familiar voice rang out. It was a purple-haired teen who'd always reminded Midoriya of Aizawa a little bit. "I would say it's Dumb and Dumber when looking at you two, but frankly it'd be an insult to Dumb and Dumber to compare you to them." The boys turned about to snap at the tired teen, only for their eyes to glaze over like dead fish. "Good. Now both of you go find Bakugo and spit at him." "There we are, Izuku. That should get rid of them for a while. We should probably get lost, though." "Hey, you okay? They didn't beat you too hard today?" Midoriya got up, holding his head, the thundering sounds of hammer against anvil pounding in his mind. All he could do was point in the direction it was coming from. Shinso knew all too well about this. Every now and again, Midoriya could hear almost a siren's call, leading him somewhere. But instead of enchanting music, it was the sound of a hammer and anvil. Taking hold of Midoriya's shoulder, Shinso decided to let caution to the wind and allow Midoriya to guide him to whatever it was that called him. After all, Shinso had just had a pretty bad day too, so distraction was certainly called for. The boys walked for miles. Shinso eventually got tired of the walking and convinced Midoriya to use public transport to reach wherever they were going, which was actually a hard-won battle of persuasion. The whole reason the two boys first met was Shinso discovered that no matter what he did or how he used his quirk on Midoriya, it would not work. He even tried pushing his brainwashing quirk to the point where Shinso started to nearly pass out with a nosebleed. But Midoriya being, well, Midoriya, the ring-bearing Greenette got Shinso safely to the nearest clinic to help him out. As for Midoriya, he befriended Shinso as he felt a kindred spirit in him. Both boys had quirks that were useful in their own ways, but everyone else around them either wrote them off as useless or villainous in Shinso's case. That and Midoriya was grateful in a way to Shinso, that if it weren't for him, he'd have never discovered that this ring allowed the Greenette to have total immunity from any form of quirk that attacked his mind. The sounds were growing louder in Midoriya's head now. It wasn't just the sound of the hammer against steel, but the careful crafting of an item that only the most experienced of hands could create upon an anvil. Midoriya shot up from his seat with Shinso being shaken awake from his nap as the duo approached the doors to the train. A welcoming female voice over the intercoms cheerfully greeted the boys at Fujinomiya Station. Shinso looked around and the boys were beyond miles from home now. Midoriya was still walking on, following whatever internal compass was guiding him. He pulled over a nearby cab driver and waited for Shinso to get in with him. He then allowed the first place that came to mind to be his requested location. "Mount Fuji, please." This caught Shinso off guard, but he turned his attention to Midoriya, who was seemingly equally shocked at the requested location. The cab driver gave a nod and some small talk as the duo were taken to the Great Volcano of Japan. This was the final leg of the boys' journey, and Midoriya could feel it now. Guided by this mysterious force, both Shinso and Midoriya found a cave opening that led inside the volcano. The boys found an outstretching walkway of tough stone that led out, overlooking the bubbling, thrashing, and aggressive fires and molten magma of the Japanese volcano. Midoriya didn't know why, but he felt the need to raise his hand that donned the ring born of his quirk. Fires rose up around the stone walkway to greet the child who had been born atop this volcano. oh so long ago. The ring began to glow a dark, fiery orange. Slowly, an inscription spread across its surface. To the eyes of Shinso, this inscription was no language he recognized, nor should it be, for it was a language forged by Midoriya's quirk. Ashna Thrakataluk Achborzum Ishikrimpatul. The ring's master looked at the inscription and read it aloud. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness, bind them. At the reading of this inscription, Mount Fuji shook, and the fiery lava below began to rise and lower, smashing against the inner walls of the volcano, like waves crash against the shoreline. Gradually, Midoriya's ring glowed once more. A beautiful hammer and anvil presented themselves at the precipice of the volcanic mountain. As if under Shinso's brainwashing, Midoriya removed his ring and placed it onto the anvil. The greenette felt flames flash past him, but paid them little to no heed as he gently hammered against his quirk, using the presented tool for the job. And unlike everything that had struck the ring before, this hammer did not shatter. Midoriya dropped the hammer to the floor, which vanished in dark smoke, and as he placed the ring back upon his finger, the anvil soon did the same as its hammer. Shinso looked on in worried shock, unable to speak as Midoriya raised his hand, silencing the volcano, whilst a smile spread across his face. Shinso, our quirks have been called useless, but I see the power of yours and mine. It was merely in its infancy when they examined it the first time. It still has much growth to do, as does yours, I predict. Come, we're going to prove everyone wrong who labeled us rejects. Shinso cocked his head at Midoriya, confused at what his friend was talking about. What are you talking about, Midoriya? I followed you all this way, and you start doing all of that? I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared right now, and then you say all that? What do you mean we're gonna prove them wrong? How? Shinso grabbed Midoriya by the collar of his shirt and started shouting at his friend, his voice reverberating around the volcanic cavern. Midoriya simply smiled and patted Shinso's shoulder, calming his brainwashing friend's nerves. We're going to train to get into UA, and I will stop at nothing to make sure we get into the hero courses. I don't care if we make it into the first or second. Either one will be good enough, so long as we're both there to prove to them all that we could do it. But I'll also be trying the support course too. Now let's get home quick. It's starting to get dark, and I'm sure our moms are freaking out right now. Midoriya laughed off the last part as he put his arm around Shinso and guided him out of the hidden volcanic entrance. As predicted, the mothers of both boys were none too pleased with their sons being out for so long. However, they were let off with a warning as Midoriya didn't tend to be a liar when it came to his family, so they too knew that he'd have dreams of hearing the pounding of the hammer and anvil. Once Izuku explained to Inko and Hisashi that he gave in and followed the sounds, finding their source to be the place of his birth, the two parents of Izuku called up Shinso's family and managed to get him out of any punishments, since he was going with his ring-wearing friend to keep an eye on him and protect him. However, Izuku did not mention to Inko or Hisashi about what he found at Mount Fuji. Instead, he chose to fabricate his first lie, which was that he was being drawn to the volcano because it was actually approaching an eruption, and all he had to do was raise his hand to make the volcano dormant once more. Which they bought, given the news reported that the volcano was showing increasing activity recently, according to both scientists and heroes in the area. However, it had finally declined rapidly and had reached a stage of dormancy all of a sudden, as if at the drop of a hat. In the days that followed, Midoriya and Shinso met up after school early to avoid Bakugo and start training their bodies for the upcoming entrance exam of UA. However, Midoriya soon revealed a trump card to Shinso. It left the purple-haired teen speechless. Midoriya stood tall like an armored titan over his friend, the ring glowing with its strange inscription. I found out I could summon that hammer and anvil at will, Shinso. So I decided to make myself a hero suit. It looks like I got a creation quirk mixed in with this ring. Isn't that awesome? Midoriya cheerfully called out from inside the intimidating suit of black armor, whilst Shinso looked upon him with worry that this appearance might make Izuku look more like a villain than a hero when he shows up looking like that. Yeah, awesome. But why did you make yourself look like that? You kinda look more like a villain in that armor than a hero. In fact, you look like a villain that's some kind of serious threat or something. Yeah. That I kinda just went with the flow and let my ring guide my hammer. Plus, everything I seem to make is made of this black metal stuff at the moment, so I'll be training with that. As for the hero suit as well, I don't care for the spotlight or rankings and stuff. Besides, I just seem to have the ability to banish and summon my armor, so I guess I can just summon my armor when I need it. Midoriya smiled and reached for Shinso's shoulder, patting it again to reassure his best friend whilst the dark armor vanished from around the greenette, leaving him in his casual clothing. Somehow, Midoriya's words eased Shinso's nerves. Soon, Midoriya dug into his pocket and offered something to Shinso. A ring, similar in design to Midoriya's. However, it was jeweled with a dark orange gemstone. The baggy-eyed teen looked at Midoriya awkwardly as he looked to the ring and then his friend. Midoriya, while I'm complimented, I don't feel the same way, and I'm more interested in girls, he said, pushing the ring back towards Midoriya, while shaking his head at the boy who had dragged him to Mount Fuji a few days ago. Not to mention, we're a bit young for what you're proposing. Midoriya soon started to laugh as he consistently returned the ring to Shinso, all the while shaking his head at Shinso's comments. No, you idiot. Just put it on and focus on the ring. Feel it. Let it guide you to what it can do for you. Caught off guard, Shinso gave up and followed the instructions, and soon he felt a hooded cloak of black fabric wrap around him, along with lightweight armor beneath it that felt stronger beyond words. Could this be what Midoriya's armor felt like? No wonder he didn't care how it looked. With protection like this, and possibly what felt like enhanced strength and speed, this was worth it. Like it? I call it the Ring of Angmar. It seems I was able to forge some of the powers of my ring into it, but I was left drained beyond belief afterwards. It was why I called you up and cancelled our training for UA, and missed out on school yesterday. Way I see it, you should share some of the abilities I have. We are best friends after all. Oh, and I came up with a name for my ring too, since we'll need to distinguish them, I imagine. I called it the One Ring. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to drop a comment about your favorite series or suggestions you may have for a What If. And many thanks to our team for their amazing work. If you're interested in joining our team and you're 16 years of age or older, feel free to check out the link in the description. That's all for today, so thank you for watching, farewell, and have a divine day.